It's that time of the season again. It's the time of the season where Horde guilds are approaching 100 kills of the Natrius, meaning their Hall of Fame and their title, Fane Slayer of the Natrius, is about to close down. This is going to leave, of course, the Alliance behind, so it's the time when people start talking and complaining about the fact that there is way more Horde guilds and Horde players than Alliance ones, and about the imbalance of the factions. Opinions and solutions start popping up, and people start debating about this imbalancedness in, at the very least, challenging high-end content. Now, the complaints. As of right now, when the Horde is approaching this reset, the 100 kills on the Natrius, we currently have 19 Alliance guilds that have killed the Natrius, and we have 15 guilds that have killed Stone Legion generals and are currently progressing on the Natrius. So they have this reset, basically. They have up until this reset to finalize the standings of exactly how many Alliance guilds managed to kill the last boss of the tier when Horde got 100 kills. Now, this obviously means nothing in terms of rewards. Alliance still has its own Hall of Fame, so it's not gonna go away just because the Horde has gotten 100, but it's cool. You know, it's interesting for data, for stats, to see just how many Alliance kills usually get to have the kill of the last boss in and before the reset where the Horde gets 100. Because if we go a little bit back in time, when we start this whole thing in Legion, which is 4 years ago at this point, the Alliance lived some sort of golden age compared to what was, normal. Because in Emerald Nightmare, when the Horde got 100 kills, the Alliance got 34. Of course, 34 out of 100, that's still 3 times less than the Horde was getting. In Nighthold, there was a significant increase because it went up to 41 Alliance guilds that killed the last boss that killed Gul'dan when the Horde got 100 kills. This was the most balanced of a tier that we have gotten in the past years. After that, it's gone on a downhill for a few tiers, because in Tomb of Sargeras we had 38 Alliance guilds killing the last boss as the Horde was getting 100. Then we went to Antorus and it went down to 23. We started the new expansion very badly, very badly, because we start in Uldir and there is a record low, actually. Just a few tiers after the record high of Nighthold, in Uldir there is the record low of only 12 Alliance guilds getting the kill of the last boss as the Horde is getting 100 of them. So we got from a little more than a fourth of the guilds being Alliance, essentially 30 out of 130 were Alliance, to 12 out of 112 being Alliance. So we got all the way down to almost 1/10, 1/9 of the guilds. Then there has been a slight but somewhat promising increase, because after Uldir, of course, if you want to see the glass half full, we can't go lower than this, After getting this low, we can only go up from here. So in BOD, in Battle of the Zaralor, 15 Alliance guilds got to kill Jaina as the Horde guilds were reaching 100, and then we got Eternal Palace when we had 19. We finished the expansion with Nyalota, where there were 20 Alliance guilds, and now we are currently at 19, but there is this entire week left for Alliance guilds to, at the very least, match the Nyalota kills. And considering there are 15 guilds progressing on the Natrius, with at least 5 of them actually pretty ahead in progression, it does look like it's going to go past the 20 mark. So there is going to be a slow but steady increase from Uldir, from the record low, all the way back up to higher numbers. But this still highlights the main issue, right? There is still far too little. If we start and move, for example, to Mythic Plus, well, the result is kind of the same, right? If there are so many raiding guilds in high ranks, in high-end content being Horde, then when you go and look at Mythic Plus, it is only natural that many of these players essentially do cross-platform PvE. Mythic Plus and high-end raiding often go together. There are certainly some raid loggers that only like raiding, and then there are only Mythic Plus guys, in their 5-man team, 6-man team, only doing Mythic Plus. But many of the people doing Mythic Plus and raids do the two activities together. So, of course, with the Horde majority in raiding progression, at least at the high end, Mythic Plus is also very Horde favored. And then this comes, and no surprise, the fact that in PvP, again, the Horde is more represented. 65% or so of the logged characters in the leaderboard are Horde. Now, the question obviously is, for years, for example, Alliance has had an advantage in PvP with every man for himself. Obviously, it has been renamed because you can't mention men in current year. That's toxic and problematic, but still, that was one of the reasons why Alliance race, the human race, was favored in PvP. In PvE, currently, you have something like shadow meld. One of the reasons why many, if not most, of the groups training and testing themselves in the MDI go Alliance is simply because they have shadow meld as a racial ability. It is a pretty tough issue to combat because the Horde races do not have an advantage anymore. They haven't had an actual advantage in years. There is a different problem when it comes to this type of representation. When the Horde was having advantages in their racials, it was stronger in the racials. Some bosses, for example, required, not required, but for good progress, for high-end progress, things like the Goblin Rocket Jump, for example. In those situations, you had more people rolling Horde, re-rolling Horde, changing and transferring to Horde. Even after this stopped, even after there wasn't a major reason to go Horde anymore, even after Mythic Plus came in and Shadow Meld was an actual, legit, very powerful racial, and in PvP you still had humans with a very powerful racial, the problem is that people were already going Horde. The high end was already Horde, which means Alliance guilds who had trouble recruiting, for example, said, man, the only option is to reroll Horde. It's not that we are going to get stronger if we reroll Horde, it's just that there's going to be more people, there's going to be more players. So they reroll Horde themselves. And then the next Alliance guild comes up and it's going to find the same problem. People who do Mythic Plus, who are interested in running Mythic Plus, they can't find enough keys. There isn't enough people queuing up for Mythic Plus because all of the raiders are moving to Horde. More of the raiders want to populate the Mythic Plus community, which means people on the Alliance side cannot find as many keys, so they reroll to Horde. And this is a problem that keeps repeating. Well after the Horde has had any real and clear advantages in their racials. This issue has continued because if you go and look at any ranking, the Horde remains more popular, more populated in its rankings, in its leaderboards, be it PvP, be it Mythic Plus, or be it raids. You have heard sometimes, I'm sure you have because I have, things like having to balance or having to buff the racials of the Alliance. Now, repeating myself, the racials being poor are not the issue. But even if the racials were being buffed, it would be a very slow progress to repopulate the Alliance player base, because nobody is going to leave Horde right now just because a racial is more powerful, because all of the raiding guilds, all of the population, all of the meat for recruitment for guilds, for example, all of the, rich auction houses full of materials and BOEs and flasks and foods and potions in massive servers with a massive pool of high-end raiders are Horde. So nobody wants to leave Horde to go and join Alliance just to gain 1.1% more damage because of a buffed racial. It will happen in top 10 guilds in the world, top 20 maybe, over time. Maybe one guild will switch. They will do much better than expected. So maybe the next year 3 guilds will switch and then maybe 5. But it's going to be a very slow process because by this point there are simply too many clusters, too many clusters of high-end players on the Horde side. In Europe, for example, this one is the most populated and the highest ranked PvE server right now, Silvermoon. Silvermoon has been, a Alliance-only server for years now. It has been the hub for Alliance players, Alliance raiders, and this is the situation. You can see that they have barely 17 guilds in the top 1,000 of guilds. Now look at the comparison Horde side, which is Kazakh. Now, Kazakh doesn't have 17 guilds in the top 1,000. Kazakh has 17 guilds in the top 200. Kazakh has 71 guilds in the top 1,000. That is the pool of players you can get by staying Horde, as opposed to just reroll into the best possible Alliance server, Horde side. Why would you want to reroll to that Alliance server even if you got a 1.1% advantage on a racial? And US follows a similar pattern. You have Storm Rage, which is another very Alliance populated server, which has 13 guilds in the top 1,000 and 1 in the top 100. And then you have the comparison, which is Area 52. Area 52 doesn't have 1 guild in the top 100, they have 6. They don't have 13 guilds in the top 1,000, they have 42. Again, why would you change to such a server, and that's supposed to be the best Alliance server in the US, when this is what is offered to you in the best Horde server? The amount of Mythic Plus keys, the amount of richness on your auction house, of your whatever you might need as a raider or PvPer or Mythic Plus player. Not to mention, more importantly, as a guild, which is something you always think about, as an officer, as a raid leader, the amount of people you can recruit, the richness of options in your recruitment possibilities, without even having to worry about getting people to transfer to your realm or something similar. They are just all here, available to you with just a single guild invite. At this point, just buffing racial is not going to work anymore. There are way too many big, stable hubs of Horde, which nobody would want to leave. Only the top 10 guilds who don't really care about any of this are going to be willing to change for just a 1% advantage. And as I mentioned, it's going to take a long time for all of the other, lower ranked guilds to follow them over time, which is what happened with the Horde side. But with the Horde side, it took quite a few expansions for this to develop, which leaves us to the only reasonable solution, of course, which is no more factions. That's the only possible way in which you can start moving away from this status quo where, regardless of the buffs that you give Alliance, Horde players are just going to stay Horde because it just has more options, more choices for you. So the solution is just to come up with a lore way to make the factions be together. You can keep your faction leaders, you can keep your faction-related stories, but when it comes to raiding, purely in-game mechanics, you let people just switch guilds and join parties and join raids of opposing factions. That's the only way. I still don't think even then too much is going to change, but it is certainly going to make people less, afraid, less reluctant to move to, for example, an alliance-dominated server, because at that point it won't matter anymore. But that's what I think the situation is. It's just very difficult. Whenever this time of the year, this time of the season comes around, when you got Hall of Fame or World First or anything of the sort, and it's just Horde everywhere, you see the same complaints about, the faction balance is screwed, Alliance is losing players left and right. Yes, but there is no clear solution to this. It's not very easy to actually fix this. Short of Blizzard literally loading people up in trains and deporting them forcefully to a different server en masse and repopulating Alliance sides with Horde players, with kidnapped Horde players, there isn't much Blizzard can do to force you to move away from Horde if you don't want to. Which is why I don't see there is many other options other than making the faction divide less pronounced and just keep it in the lore setting but not in the actual in-game activities. That's the only way I think it might shake things up a little bit. Now, off with this problem. Now let's talk about something more speculative, because the vendor build has been data mined. The vendor build is what comes before a PTR. Now, let's go and do some history on the PTR data. All the way back to Legion, how long did it take for a patch to come out after the PTR was released, right? Because, at least as far as I could go and find some news about it, when a vendor build was data mined and was found in the developer build of the game, it took only a couple of weeks for Blizzard to announce and then release the PTR for the upcoming patch. So if we go by this logic, what a surprise, Blizzard is going to announce the PTR, is going to reveal the PTR on BlizzCon, which is the 19th of February, a couple of weeks from now. It seems to be perfectly on schedule, suspiciously on schedule, that the vendor build comes out a couple of weeks before BlizzCon. BlizzCon is a time for announcements, so it's pretty obvious. It's a pretty educated guess to say that the PTR is going to be announced at BlizzCon. So once we know that, once we can speculate from the PTR being revealed the 19th of February, how long did it take before a patch was released after the PTR was being released, announced and released? All the way back to Legion 7.1, which was Nighthold. I'm talking about big patches here. In Nighthold, it took 54 days. It was announced in October the 14th and then came out in December the 9th. So a little under 2 months. In 7.2, which was Tomb of Sargeras, it took 100 days, so a little over 3 months this time around for the version of the game to be released after the PTR. And then the last one, the Antorus patch, it took 98 days, so again a little over 3 months. You go in BFA, in Battle for Azeroth, and you have 83 days for 8.1, so for Battle of the Zarlor to come out, this time a little under 3 months. And then we had the big hitter, which was the Eternal Palace, which took 123 days. That was 4 months. Now, to be fair, this was the bigger patch of the year, because BOD was essentially just one raid, Nyalota was one raid and essentially a couple of recycled zone. Eternal Palace was the big one. Eternal Palace had an entire zone, Najatar, and an entire zone, Mechagon, plus the new dungeon and the new raid, so it was much more hefty in terms of size. And then you have the 99 days, of course, of Nyalota. So on average, it is hinging in at around 3 months of time from when the PTR is announced. So logically speaking, we go from the end of February, from the mid-end of February right now, all the way to May. So 15th, 10, 15, 20th of May is when 9.1 could be released. One thing worth noting is that in both last expansions, the first patch of the year, the first big content patch of the year, was the one that took the least amount of time, was also the shortest one, the tiniest one. In Legion, you had Nighthold, which was one raid, and that's it. And in BFA, you had BOD, which was one raid, and that's it. It was the smaller one. It was the one that didn't have any extra zones, for example. So if we go by that logic, then it's going to take a couple of months only. So it would be out in April. Now, to know exactly about the size of the patch, just how big it's going to be, we would have to wait for BlizzCon. We will wait for BlizzCon to see what kind of announcement they make. Of course, if the only thing that gets announced is the new raid, then you can assume it's going to be a pretty quick patch. If the next thing that is announced is a new raid in a new zone with a new dungeon, then that's probably something that is going to take a little bit more time to stay in the PTR. So for this, I guess the only thing we can do is wait and see. Just like we have to wait and see the end of this week to see how many Alliance guilds end up killing the Natrius. We are at 19, we have a maximum possibility of 34, and a realistic possibility of 25. My guess is 22. I'm going to stay conservative, and I'm going to guess on about 3 guilds getting to kill the Natrius before Tuesday, I guess, for NA. After this speculative video, I'm going to take my leave. I'm going to leave you with these thoughtful questions for you. Feel free to throw out random dates, random numbers for the date of the next patch, for the date of 9.1. If you get the date correctly, you're going to win a prize, which is fucking nothing as usual. You're getting nothing from me. So, see you guys soon. And in the meantime, 9.1 out the 17th of April.